Think back to 1980.
I want the hostages' families and the hostages to know it. I want the world to know that I am not going to resume business as usual until our hostages are back here, free and at home.
The time is now, my fellow Americans, to recapture our destiny, to take it into our own hands. To do this.
5 seconds left in the game. Do you believe in miracles? Yes!
And in southwest Washington, Mount St. Helens is awaking, shaking to life after more than 100 years.
The damn thing takes this mountain, I'm going along with it.
Everything was swept away. There was nothing left here.
Oh, dear God. My God, this is hell.
Tonight, we want to take you back 10 years to the time before Mount St. Helens exploded, to hear the stories of the people who lived, the stories of the people who died, the stories that bring Mount St. Helens up from the ashes.
TV base there for.
When did you first know something unusual was going on?
A couple months before the big eruption, I think it was March, there were 3 pretty good-sized earthquakes, and this is after St. Helens had been quiet for something like 123 years or something, but things started rumbling.
Yes. And then when those first whiffs came out, we just all sat back in shock, and we said, what's going on?
But wasn't there a time then, though, when you thought maybe that was all it was going to do?
We didn't have the faintest idea what it was going to do, when it was going to do it, or what was even likely to happen.
Historically, there had been other eruptions in the Cascade chain. Mount Lassen had gone off. Occasionally, Mount Shasta showed signs, but they were all real subtle. And when you have that kind of history, disaster does not come to your mind.
I'll never forget the 27th of March when they told us it had actually burped, the first little steam and ash cloud. They dumped us, myself and a photographer in the helicopter, zipped us down there, threw us out on this snow-covered peak about 10 miles away, and there we were, all set to do the first live report from Mount St. Helens.
Here is that the mountain looks like a scene out of a Christmas card. There is no smoke, there is no ash, there is no steam coming out of Mount St. Helens right now. We have just learned that a Forest Service aircraft going over the crater, the top, the summit of Mount St. Helens, has reported that the crack, the fissure in the center of that crater is getting bigger.
St. Helens was the jewel of the Cascades. But the jewel had a fiery flaw. Artist Paul Kane was among the first whites to see that flaw. It was 1847. The Indians had lived with these eruptions for centuries. To them, St. Helens was Fire Mountain. But by March 1980, old eruptions were ancient history.
I don't think that anything drastically is going to happen, really.
At first, the earthquakes came in 1s and 2s, then swarms of them set seismograph needles dancing. Within days, quakes shook the mountain 1 a minute.
Well, I think the earthquakes have to be interpreted as a warning that something is coming.
It's been said for years that this mountain will blow at some time or another, but I really don't think that's going to amount to anything.
It still looks like the volcano is going through a throat-clearing process, as it were.
Some geologists had called St. Helens potentially the most violent volcano in the country.
Its historic eruptions and older eruptions, prehistoric, have been very explosive. The initial phases would produce ashfall all over southwestern Washington, and on the near flanks, where we are right now, would likely be covered by avalanches of very hot debris, up to 1,000 degrees centigrade.
And where we're standing right now, what might be the consequence?
I wouldn't want to be here to talk about it. We'd probably be killed.
Dying was the last thing on the minds of sightseers. Hundreds and hundreds of sightseers. They swarmed to the mountain.
I want to see it blow. It'd be great. Something you'd only get one chance in a lifetime to see.
Let me hear you now. I don't know. I don't know.
The mountain blew on noon Thursday, and we decided that evening to do a shirt and had it ready Friday.
I don't know where I'm gonna go when the volcano blows.
Can't go any further than this point.
Roadblocks were set up, but Cowlitz County had only 34 deputies.
There's logging roads all over this country, and we just can't control them all.
On April 3rd, Governor Dixie Lee Ray declared an emergency.
Don't go to Mount St. Helens. Don't try to get as close to the mountain as possible.
But that declaration and Ray's appeal did not mean the mountain or the surrounding area was closed to tourists. It did allow the National Guardsmen to come in to help, but even they could do little to keep determined sightseers away. By now, the volcano was spitting steam and ash hour after hour, and geologists detected harmonic tremors rumbling through the mountain. The long, rolling shock waves meant molten lava was on the move. A bulge began to grow on the north side. Geologists had two theories. One, that the summit was sliding. The other, that molten rock was pushing up, looking for a way out. By month's end, the bulge was 300 feet high. Rock slides, eruptions, and earthquakes ate away at the crater walls. In just 30 days since the first eruption, St. Helens was rocked by more big quakes than California gets in 10 years. Finally, on April 30th, Governor Ray signed an order closing portions of the mountain.
This order will establish two zones. One, a red zone from which all people are excluded, and a larger blue zone at which people will be permitted to go only on a day-to-day basis and only during daylight hours.
The public believed the so-called red zone was a 10-mile circle around St. Helens and the blue zone a 20-mile circle. They weren't. Here's how they really looked. The western edge of the red zone was barely 3 miles from the summit. Its border backed right up to Weyerhaeuser timberland. The trees were outside the forbidden zone. Logging continued, and scores of sightseers set up camp in the same areas, believing they were safe. But some began to worry.
Just, when it comes, what can we do? Do we have time to get out, or, is it going to come quick?
I've thought this out for years. I knew this was coming. I'm not goddamn dumb. I may be old, but I'm kind of cute about it.
Harry Truman had been in Mount St. Helens' backyard since 1929. He and his wife ran this lodge at the west end of Spirit Lake. She had died 3 years ago, and in 1980, Harry would tell you he'd let the place go a bit since then. These days, his company was an ever-present whiskey and Coke. But he still felt fiercely protective of the lodge, right down to its sign.
But it's an emblem of me. That damn sign's been there 50-some years.
What if you took it down?
Well, I'm not going to take it down. Nobody's going to take it down. It'll take me down in a wooden kimono down that road, ass backwards when I go down that road, or I'm not leaving. And I'm not going to take my name off of that sign that's sandblasted. I've changed it 5 times in my life, and it's going to sit there till it rots down. And by God, I'd like to see the man that's going to take that sign off that post.
We would get used to hearing Harry talk that way. The usually scholarly National Geographic magazine would later note that he raised profanity to a new high. That conclusion didn't surprise anyone who had talked with Harry about the volcano. You see, Harry and his wife always said they would spend the rest of their days at Spirit Lake, and Harry didn't see any reason to change that now. The mountain may have been moving, but he wasn't.
Well, the gang of the ranger station come down, running the cars all excited. And the mountains are shaking every minute, and the lodge is shaking. They come running in there and said, "Come on, Truman. We're evacuating. We're getting the hell going out of here." They said the office down in Vancouver radioed and said, "You come out of there and bring everybody with you." I said, "Hell, I'm not going." They said, "Well, bring Harry with you." And I said, "You tell them, by God, I'm not leaving. You want to get out of here."
But while that side of Harry may be familiar to you, here's a side you haven't seen. For in this portion of an interview, a portion that never got on the air, Harry let it slip that underneath all that cussing and crustiness, he was afraid. Afraid of earthquakes.
See, one of those big quakes I had a few years ago rolled me right out of bed. Now that baby, you wasn't going to stay in bed at that quake, and that scares you. So I've been scared of them ever since. And I'm scared of them yet, to tell you the truth. I'm shaking like a leaf now. Can't hardly hit my mouth with glass.
But you're still not going to leave.
No, and I'm not going to try to hit my mouth either. No, I'm not going to leave. You're damn right I'm not going to leave. I'm going to stay here. Damn right. This is my home that's going to have to come and get me. And no authority can take me out of here. No authority dare. Those sheriffs are nobody, and they know better to tackle Truman.
You can always go back. I never talked to the man, but I kept thinking you can always go back. Get out of there while you can. And he just wouldn't leave.
He was like the rest of us, I think. I don't think he believed, I don't think any of us believed that it could possibly blow up.
Harry Truman was so stubborn. I mean, so many people went to him and said, get out of there, you're crazy. And I think a lot of us thought he was crazy, but there was something to be admired, too, because he didn't want to leave his home.
That crazy, damn stupid. Okay. The people see that, they say the craziest man in God's green world, old Truman.
You know, the week before the eruption, though, no one still can anticipate how big it was going to be. I think people started getting a little bit worried. I think it was the 8th of May. There was a pretty good-sized eruption. People started moving out, and I think the feds came in and they started saying, let's get folks out of here because this could turn into something, though they still didn't know how big it was going to be.
No, I remember seeing some videotape of a guy who said, I just want to go in and get snowmobiles, I think it was he had said.
Under my own responsibility, I go up and get them.
No, under the sheriff's order.
Hey, we wouldn't be in there 10 minutes.
There were a lot of people that were really in our face about this business of not letting anyone in there. You don't have any right to keep us out of there. We're going to sue you. Well, get off the phone and go do it. You know, I'm busy.
Les Nelson was busy. Keeping property owners and sightseers away from the mountain was too much for his tiny force to handle. People were getting restless. For many, St. Helens was becoming a hassle, an inconvenience, even a joke. Some ash here, some steam there, but what was all the fuss about? Even government geologists sounded vague.
We've tried some rather simplified calculations of what might conceivably go, and it depends so much on the assumptions that we've thought we haven't come up with anything useful.
Thursday, May 15th. Sheriff Les Nelson heads up to Spirit Lake for what would be his last chat with Harry Truman.
That was an ominous place. That was strange, an eerie feeling to be up there at that mountain. It was extremely quiet. Everything but Harry was quiet. And he said, I'll be stranded up here, but you guys can throw me a loaf of bread or something out of a helicopter or something. He said, we'll be all right here. And I guess that I respected that. He was entitled to be left there. What would you have arrested him for? For being in his home on a quiet evening?
Other people want to be in their homes on the mountain, too.
And how would you feel? You want to see we're paying taxes and we'd like to use our property. I'm not afraid.
It's Saturday, May 17th. Washington State Patrol Chief Robert Landon has his hands full.
Maybe I ought to stay in there like Harry.
Property owners fed up with the roadblocks have forced this showdown in Toutle, 25 miles downstream from the volcano. Landon has an offer he hopes will calm them.
Governor Ray's position on this is that she wants to be of some assistance to the property owners and let you go in and at your own risk and take care of whatever you have to take care of.
Officers lead the group up the mountain in a convoy. Everyone in together in the morning, everyone out together at 6 that night, with the promise of a second trip in the morning. Some people think all this caution is a bit silly.
We've lived there a long time and we've seen all kinds of conditions on this road and on that mountain, and I feel that our home is safe.
But come tomorrow, nothing will be safe.
I really don't know how to describe it. It was just a feeling that something was going to happen and I just needed to be here.
KOMO photographer Dave Crockett had covered the mountain every day for 3 weeks. But a couple of days before the 18th, he'd been rotated out, sent home for a rest. Dave didn't rest.
I just woke up one night and about 3 a.m. and decided it was time to get back down here and start taking more pictures of the mountain, start covering the story again. I just really wanted to be here to cover what I felt was probably going to be the biggest story of the decade.
But the story of the decade nearly killed Dave Crockett.
And as you can tell probably from this picture, I'm walking towards the only light I can see on top of a ridge. I can hear the mountain behind me rumbling. It's an enormous mud and water slide came down and washed out the road. I never really thought I'd believe this or say this, but at this moment, I honest to God believe I'm dead.
When we come back, Dave Crockett struggled to survive.
Right up the valley, along the stream. Yeah, this is it. Boy, it's grown up.
It shouldn't be hard to find the place that almost became your grave. But young trees now blur once familiar ash and mud landmarks. In 10 years, the mountain scars have softened.
Okay, that's where I was, right over there exactly.
On that Sunday morning 10 years ago, this was the mountain Dave Crockett came to photograph. He joined hundreds of others, waiting, hoping for something to happen. On a ridge to the north, Gary Rosenquist and Joel Harvey had set up a camera.
I look over and back at me, I see the sun coming up through the trees. And I said, well, that'd really be a nice shot. The crater area, it was all golden. The sun was just on that area right there.
Dave Crockett was just arriving at the mountain.
I really don't know how to describe it. It was just a feeling that something was going to happen and I just needed to be here.
Directly north of the volcano, ham radio operator Jerry Martin had started his morning broadcast on an emergency network. It is 8:32 a.m. 4 men on the mountain. Their world is about to come apart.
Now we've got an eruption down here. Now we've got a big slide coming off.
Gary Rosenquist starts snapping pictures. Jerry Martin's broadcast ends with those words. And Joel Harvey is watching.
It was just cresting this last ridge, and it was rolling real slow. You could see the heat wave on top. I didn't know there was a heat wave or shock wave. I remember seeing that. And it was just cresting, rolling over this ridge and coming at us as we were pulling out of the campsite. And I thought, we don't stand a chance of getting out of here.
Photographers Rosenquist and Harvey are in a race for their lives. So is KOMO's Dave Crockett.
I knew I had to get out of there. I started down the valley, look at my rearview mirror, and there's just a wall of debris, mud, steam, rocks, boulders, and full-size trees just rolling along. The whole valley's disappearing behind me. Came down here, ended up right here. I was right about here. The whole, this whole little area here just disappeared in front of me completely. Just a big explosion of mud and trees, and I was just blocked off. At that point, I just jumped out of my car, grabbed my film camera, and I went right up there on that ridge where I had a view just over the trees of the mountain, and I could see what was happening. I opened the door and the alarm started going off, but it was kind of the least of my concerns at that point. The ground was moving, I could feel the earthquakes. The wind is being sucked up towards the mountain, towards the blast. By this time you can hear the mountain rumbling. Constant rumbling, grinding, growling sound. I had this huge cloud of material with lightning and blue and purple colors, rumbling, you see lightning hitting the ground. I had to get away from that.
Dave starts walking, uphill, through the steaming mud, through the ash cloud. He turns on the camera and starts to talk.
Oh, dear God, whoever finds this, I don't know. Oh, you can't see this, I'm sure it's too dark. I've left the car behind. Rest of the gear, we got one magazine. And as you can tell probably from this picture, I'm walking towards the only light I can see on top of a ridge. I can hear the mountain behind me rumbling. It's an enormous mud and water slide came down and washed out the road. I never really thought I'd believe this or say this, but at this moment, I honest to God believe I'm dead. There's really no way to describe those feelings. I feel the ash now in my eyes. It's getting very hard to breathe. Burns to breathe. And maybe I'm talking. It burns to breathe. Burns my eyes. Oh dear God. My God, this is hell. I just can't describe it. It's pitch black. Just pitch black. This is hell on earth I'm walking through. Oh God. Just one step at a time. If I can just keep walking. God, if I could only, there was more air to breathe. Oh yeah. I'm not turning the camera off like I promised I would, but oh my God. Oh my God. Well, it's been about 10 minutes. It's now totally pitch black. I can't see to keep on walking. I guess I'm just gonna have to sit down here and wait it out. God, I pray to God that's all I'm doing, sitting here waiting it out. God. Oh dear God. It's very, very hard to breathe in this. I can't see a thing. If only I could keep walking, you know, only if I could do something. Only I could do something, you know. It's just sitting here. Yeah, I got the wrong attitude here. I mean, this would be something to tell my grandchildren about. Oh man. I'll turn the camera off. Maybe hopefully I'll be coming back and talking to you later. It's a little bit of break. I'm getting a little gray. I'm gonna keep walking again. Start walking again. Here goes. Wish me luck. If only this air would clear for 2 minutes. Give me a clear breath of air. I don't know what's in this stuff. Now, I can tell you one thing. This stuff is not made for humans to breathe. I'm sitting down resting. I just can't breathe. I only walked about 50 feet since I talked to you last. God, if they just give me a break. Just 1 5-minute run for it. Well, I'm trying the radio. So I'm on the portable. I think I can get out of here. Here goes. I don't know why I'm recording this, but oh well. Here goes. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Does anybody copy this unit? It's portable 5, mayday, mayday, mayday. My God, I never realized how badly I wanted to live. Oh, I wanted to live so bad. It's completely black in here again. I can't see a foot in front of my face. The ash is coming down very heavy on me. The breathing isn't getting any harder. That's encouraging. It's hard, but it's not getting any harder. It's either gotten very dark in here or it's a horrible thought, or else I'm blind. I don't know what's in this stuff. I can feel it falling on me. Can't see anything. God, I want to live. You know, Shram, you were right. You were right, Shram. When I saw that mountain go, I turned that car around and I could see in the rearview mirror, you know, I could see the stuff coming. There was no way I was going to outrun that. I just parked that car and I started running for high ground. And that mud flow came down. It came within 3 feet of the car, man, with trees and boulders and things, you know, 5 times as big as that news car, Shram. Oh, about 50 feet from me. My God, you were right. Never should have come up here. You were right. I still say I'm going to live to tell my grandchildren about this, though. With God's help. With God's help, I am. Well, I gotta conserve film again. Mayday, mayday, mayday. The breeze started blowing the ash out, and all of a sudden I realized I could breathe a little better, and I could see a little bit of greenness. It wasn't pitch black. I could see maybe a couple feet. At that point, I took a photograph of myself with a wide-angle lens, you know, held the camera out in front of me, and click, and I had a big smile on my face. I was just covered with ash, you know, just my hair was sticking straight out, but I think you can tell from the expression on my face, I thought then maybe I was going to get out. When I finally realized I had made it and I was going to live, I just started laughing and screaming out loud and just yelling at the mountain.
St. Helens would claim many lives today, but not this one.
Wouldn't you know, as I think back on it, I remember the weather. It was a crystal clear day, beautiful sunshine that Sunday morning. And I know this sounds funny, but I was up real early. And I swear I heard it, felt it, something.
I remember that morning vividly, but I was still sound asleep. 8:30, I hear this little boop. And it was a backfire or a car or something. I'm real groggy and just roused out of sleep. And so I roll over and go back to sleep for a little while. And after a while, the telephone comes, rings, you know, telephone rings. Get in here. The mountain has exploded. I said, no, not possible. No way. Yeah, the mountain's erupted. And so like Steve, we just rush pell-mell in here to try desperately to figure out what the heck is going on.
People were just intense at that point, to the point, I think, where for a while it was really chaos.
See, I was a little farther away, so I didn't feel the presence as much as I saw it. I was in my last year of school at Pullman, and I'll never forget, you said it was crystal clear. I looked out over the wheat fields, and on the horizon, you could see this enormous black cloud moving across the horizon, and I thought, that is the biggest storm. That's the most incredible thing I've ever seen. You know, within hours, it was black, pitch black in the middle of the day, and a few hours later, the ash started to fall.
I remember the first time I did see this scene of, well, they said it was noon. They said it was a bright, sunny day, and it was just pitch black. I couldn't believe it. I said, okay, it really wasn't noon. That couldn't be that black. And then I kept seeing more pictures of all that ash and steam. And here I am living 2,000 miles away from here in Milwaukee, and I don't remember if it was the next day, 2 days later, 3 days later, we started getting ash.
As broadcasting students, this was a big story compared to covering Pullman school board meetings. You know, this was something pretty big. We pulled all the experts we could into the studio there, and
we're dealing with a lot of unknowns, I'm sure, but have you got any idea of what the effect of all this ash is going to have on them?
The ash was so novel to all of us. I mean, when it started to fall, I remember all of us going outside and looking at it, and it was so light, and it got into your car and into your mouth and your eyes and up your nose and in your hair, and it was everywhere.
The other sense that I remember is a real sense of foreboding, because you came face to face with the power of nature. And it was so overwhelming in scope and in size. And the sense that you get was really quite strange, because you wonder, how long is this going to go on? I mean, how bad could this get? How much could blow up? And you have no answers to these questions, and you feel very, very helpless. And I think that was the feeling that all of us had in the back of your mind. You're trying to be a professional. You're trying to do your job. You're trying to get the story. At the same time, you're thinking, I'm part of this. I'm not just reporting on it. I'm part of this. It was scary.
It's the worst thing in the world. I've never seen anything like it.
The eruption tore 1,300 feet off the mountain. And what had been snow melted instantly into a raging flood tide, carrying off everything in its path.
Water just started rising up over the top. And then the logs started jamming up against the bridge there and just tumbled like a toy.
Mud, rocks, and shattered trees choked the north and south forks of the Toutle River. The force of the water demolished a Weyerhaeuser logging camp. Trees tossed around like toothpicks. Trucks twisted and flattened.
We were trying to just get everybody, cleared out of the area, and by that time we could hear the trees snapping that were coming down the river.
On that Sunday morning 10 years ago, Greg Drew came down to the family grocery store in Toutle to stand guard. He didn't stay long.
I'll never forget that sound as long as I live, because when we were, as we were running up the hill to safety, that's the thing that I could hear was all of that snapping, just like you were there snapping kindling across your knee.
As Greg and his neighbors ran, others watched their dreams drown.
What happened to your home?
The mud flow got it, totaled it out, and I have nothing except for what my kids and I grabbed when we got in the car.
What the water didn't carry off, the ash threatened, and refugees fled both.
Well, we couldn't breathe. The baby was having breathing problems, and we come on in. We barely made it.
Others staggered out of the hills, their cars coated in ash an inch thick.
It's an unfit place for man or beast, I'll tell you. It's a good way to get killed. It's terrible.
The ash cloud rose 12 miles. It smothered everything. And across the Cascades, the ash blinded eastern Washington.
It was kind of weird when it just turned black outside, and it's only, 12 o'clock, and it was just pitch black outside.
Roads closed. The state was cut in half and cut off. Thousands were stranded in a nightmare landscape.
Visibility got so bad, and a lot of times that you had to stop. You couldn't go any farther because you couldn't even see the hood of your car.
A small inconvenience compared to what Bob McMahon faced on his farm in Randall, just north of the volcano.
What about your alfalfa field? How much do you have?
It's flat. It was about 2.5 feet high, and now it's probably 6 inches high and covered with mud.
10 years ago, a KOMO news crew walked Bob's fields with him. They had been smothered with nearly an inch of ash. The eruption of the ash spooked his herd. It was a day he cannot forget.
beautiful. That's just like the day of the ash fall. It was just a day similar to this.
For 70 years, McMahon's family had survived floods and snow and killing frost, yet nothing could prepare them for May 18th.
Mud balls started falling in a swimming pool, and they were the size of marbles. And you could hear the thunder. All these clouds, they were just interlaced with lightning, and the thunder was just continuous. Of course, I was scared and nervous and didn't know what to expect, and was fearful for what might happen next, you know.
As it turned out, Bob had nothing to fear, but what was happening around the mountain was far worse than anyone could imagine. Aboard a National Guard helicopter, Sheriff Les Nelson flew up the Toutle River toward the blast zone.
Right up in front of that mountain, and I don't know of any way to describe it other than I just felt like I was flying through the gates of hell. And looking at Spirit Lake, you know, I couldn't see the lake. And it finally dawned on us that it was just had turned brown with mud and dirt and logs.
Soon, President Jimmy Carter would see firsthand the fury of the mountain. And like the country sheriff, the president would be awestruck.
Enormous blocks of ice apparently are still covered by literally hundreds of feet of fluffy face powder type ash. Enormous cave-ins are taking place. Steam is bubbling up. It's much worse than anything I've ever seen pictures of the moon's surface.
Jess Hagerman was a National Guard chopper pilot, a Marine combat veteran. He had faced death in Vietnam. But 10 years ago, he prayed he could reach the living in time.
You know, you sort of always hope that, you know, maybe there's somebody behind a hill or in a cave or somehow that could have survived.
And it was with that hope that rescue crews flew in to the devastation. National Guard, Army, Air Force pilots, sheriff's deputies, and volunteers. Their job? To find someone alive or bring out the bodies.
When we flew on up the North Fork of the Toutle that first day, we hit the ash, and it was kind of like flying around in a milk bottle with milk in it.
He did find 2 men alive and went to carry one out.
When I got up to him, he had big open sores, probably about the size of silver dollars, all over his face, big open welts. And the other thing that I remember is his clothes. As I picked him up, it was just like all of his clothes were scorched with an iron. And if you just pulled it apart like that, it would just shred.
That Sunday afternoon in Kelso, Sue Ruff staggered out of a chopper. She and her friend Bruce Nelson and their dogs had been 14 miles from the mountain. Others with them did not make it out.
It took 2 of our best friends' lives, so.
Pilot Mike Cairns had rescued Sue and Bruce.
It's devastating. It looks like a hydrogen bomb or some atomic type of explosion. Everything is just level.
Survivor Grant Christensen was trying to find out if anyone had seen his brother.
Did they have burned hands? One had burned hands.
The 2 were separated after the eruption. For some families, the agony of separation, of not knowing, would go on for days.
I'm damned angry.
Bob Graves' daughter and son-in-law had not been found.
Other people are missing relatives in there. If they as civilians can hike up that damn mountain, then why can't these people that we're paying our tax dollars to in the Army get off their duffs and get up there?
Bob Graves could not see what the searchers saw, why just getting up there was so hard. And all too often, when they did make it, they found what Jess Hagerman found, a pickup truck, the life blasted out of it. The only merciful thing about the scene was that death had come quickly.
These two people that we found, the driver still had his hands on the wheel, his head was up. The passenger had his hands folded in his lap and just sitting there.
North of the mountain, another search crew went in.
This country is ruined so bad that the landmarks on the map and what you have out here is absolutely two different things.
The ash and muck were 4 feet deep. They searched for a mining camp and a cabin. 3 people were missing here. The only hope, Deputy Sheriff Brian Hill and his dog Hauser, trained to sniff out the dead and the living.
Good boy. I think we just found the cabin. We'll get back to you in a minute.
Yeah, we got one victim here. Just a second before we contaminate, let him search some more. Check and see if there's a victim right there. He identified there for a second. You find something there?
The search turned up all 3 victims. The team marked the graves. They would come back later to retrieve the bodies. And there would be many bodies, too many, and too often too young. Across the country, people picked up their newspapers and saw in this photo the horror of the volcano. In Renton, one man picked up his newspaper and saw in this photo his 11-year-old grandson.
It was a rainy afternoon when KOMO photographer Dave Crockett walked us back 10 years. Back to the same place he had struggled through, escaping the eruption and the ash cloud. And we opened up the past.
I had some problems with, I guess they call survivor guilt. I wonder why I got out, and a lot of people didn't. For a couple of years, I had dreams where I'd come back up in here with rescue people, and I'd go through the trees and the ash, and we'd find bodies. And they'd ask me, you know, looking at these bodies, well, why didn't you do something to help these people? You know, I could, intellectually, I knew it wasn't my fault, but I think just emotionally, I couldn't quite shake it.
It took Dave years to shake the guilt. Jess Hagerman still flies for the National Guard, and as a Weyerhaeuser pilot, he knows the mountain now as well as anyone.
Flying around the mountain that first day and then days afterwards, it made you feel about that big, about as big as a gnat in a whole universe.
10 years ago, Jess helped to rescue 7 survivors in the blast zone. For his courage and skill, he was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. Cowlitz County Sheriff Les Nelson says he doesn't care if he ever sees the mountain again. Nelson retired 4 years ago. Bob McMahon still farms his place in Randall. The ash had no long-term effect on his crops or his herd. Joel Harvey and Gary Rosenquist, the photographers who captured the volcano's fury on film and lived to tell about it, never got rich off their luck. 10 years later, that doesn't seem to bother them.
I've tried to not let it make a difference in my life. I tried to downplay it as much as I can.
Why?
Well, he'd get a big head about something. I didn't want it to change me. I was pretty happy with who I was, and I didn't want to change.
And the two really haven't changed much. Joel still works for the post office. Gary used to drive a bus for Metro. They are, of course, the lucky ones, the survivors. 57 people died that Sunday 10 years ago. At first, the officials, even the president, were quick to criticize the victims for their foolishness.
Curious people refused to comply with the directives issued by the governor, the local sheriff, the state patrol, and others, and slipped around highway barricades and entered the dangerous area when it was well known to be very dangerous.
But Carter was wrong. Only 3 of the 57 who died were in the so-called red zone, that danger zone. And if the blast had happened 1 day later, Weyerhaeuser loggers would have been in the very same places the tourists were, and hundreds would have been killed. The victims' families sued the state and sued Weyerhaeuser, but they lost. Some small cash settlements were made, but nothing could repay what the mountain had taken. It took geologist David Johnston He had predicted that violent eruption. And Sunday morning, when the mountain blew, Johnston was on a ridgetop staring down the volcano's throat. He radioed his colleagues, "Vancouver, Vancouver, this is it." But by the time the message reached them, Johnston was dead. 3 weeks after the eruption, a helicopter touched down on the blasted, barren ground that was once the Mount St. Helens Lodge, the place Harry Truman had called home. Inside the chopper, his sister, Jerry Whiting. Harry had never had a chance. She knew that now, and she had come to say goodbye.
Some final thoughts on the mountain today when we come back.
I think one of the most phenomenal things about watching what's happened at St. Helens since the eruption is watching the life return and to see how nature works. And we went down to Spirit Lake a couple of years after the eruption and took some divers down there and went in and saw the return of life to a lake that had been dead, completely devoid of any oxygen, of any life whatsoever. And here you could see little zooplankton and things swimming around and starting to come back.
I think the thing that most impressed me when I finally got a chance to get close to the mountain was the scale. I flew down there with our helicopter pilot in Air 4 and we went right into the crater and landed next to the lava dome. And the scale, imagine 8 kingdoms stacked on top of each other.
I have flown down there like you, inside the crater, around the lava dome, and you're up about 8,000 or 9,000 feet, and suddenly you feel very small and very fragile and very insignificant, like you're sitting in the palm of somebody's hand. And you begin to realize just how strong, how powerful, how overwhelming the forces are that are there inside the mountain. It really makes you sit and take stock of who you are and what you are, and it can make you very humble.
But humility comes hard for us. In a technological age, an age in which we feel we control so much, a trip to Mount St. Helens reminds us of how much we do not control. Plants return without us. Animals return without us. And the mountain erupts without our being able to predict when or how violently, without our even knowing what to do. St. Helens is beyond our control, and perhaps that's why we find ourselves drawn to it, to see the result of the awesome power displayed here and a portion of our Earth being recreated. And yet, as the lava dome rebuilds what was once St. Helens' perfect peak, we're reminded that the 1980 eruption is only one of dozens and dozens of eruptions in the mountain's 40,000-year history. And it will almost certainly happen again. So we wonder, will we live to see the volcano's awesome power again? And what story will come up from those ashes?